imagine finding out that uh, the greatest leader in your nation's entire history, the guy whose face is literally on the currency, who has statues in every single plaza, was actually just a completely unqualified shepherd.
Right, yeah.
I mean, a guy who spent a decade living in caves as a fugitive, and then later he used his ultimate political power to commit murder just to cover up an affair.
Oh, absolutely.
You'd probably want to tear those statues down, right? You'd assume history got it completely wrong. Because, we expect our historical titans to have these clean, perfectly curated resumes.
Yeah, an unbroken streak of, personal brilliance and public successes.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of biblical history, specifically the life of David, and that entire expectation just shatters.
It really does. It falls apart completely.
The leadership landscape we're looking at today is just, it's shocking in its lack of modern PR. So welcome to the deep dive. We are really thrilled you're joining us today.
We really are. We have a lot of ground to cover.
We absolutely do. We are unpacking a massive stack of historical and theological research today, specifically focusing on this really extensive essay by Chris R. Velazquez.
It's a fantastic piece of work.
It really is. And it's paired with some incredibly dense data mapping infographics that detail David's life. And our entire mission for this deep dive is to figure out what a heart after God actually means.
Which is such a loaded phrase,
Right, because based on the evidence in these sources, it has absolutely nothing to do with perfection.
No, not at all. And, to really grasp this, I've adjusted our surroundings a bit for you.
Oh, wow, yeah. The visuals are completely different today.
Yeah, if you look at the backdrop, we're sitting out under this ancient, starlit Judean sky.
It's beautiful.
But woven into those constellations, if you look closely, are these faint, glowing timelines mapping out a really grand, sweeping narrative of history. And what's fascinating here is that the text makes this definitive, almost offensive claim.
Offensive in what way?
Well, it claims that David is not the gold standard because he never failed. He is the exemplar because of this specific concept called covenant loyalty.
Covenant loyalty. Okay, that is the anchor for this entire deep dive.
That's the central idea, yeah.
Because, we throw the word loyalty around a lot today, right? Like brand loyalty or, loyalty to a sports team. But this is something fundamentally different from that, isn't it?
Completely different. The research here defines it as a governing orientation of the heart that perpetually returns to God.
Perpetually returns. So it's an ongoing thing.
Exactly. It's not about how emotionally intense you are during a worship service or how high you climb on the corporate ladder.
Right.
It's this underlying operating system, an operating system that trusts God's promises, submits to his authority, and values his reputation above your own personal survival.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if we really want to understand how an operating system like that is built in a person, we have to go back to the factory floor.
Back to the very beginning.
The origin story, 1 Samuel chapter 16. And honestly, looking at the historical context the sources provide, the sheer insulting nature of David's initial selection is just mind-blowing.
It really is an intentional subversion of everything the ancient world valued.
Walk us through that scene.
So you have the prophet Samuel, and he arrives in Bethlehem to anoint a new king from the family of Jesse.
And Samuel is doing exactly what any modern headhunter or recruiter would do, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's looking at the oldest, tallest, most strapping sons.
Right. He sees Eliab, the firstborn, and thinks, boom, there's the CEO. Look at that jawline. Look at that posture.
Because that was the precedent. The current king at the time, Saul, was literally described in the text as being a head taller than anyone else in Israel.
He looked apart. He looked like a king on a movie poster.
He really did. But God actively rejects these impressive older brothers. And the reason given which the research presents as the ultimate interpretive key to David's entire life is that humans look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart.
Which leaves Samuel standing there empty-handed, having to awkwardly ask Jesse, do you have any more kids?
Yeah, is this everybody?
And Jesse essentially says, oh, right, the youngest. He's out with the sheep. The kid was so culturally and socially irrelevant that his own father didn't even bother to invite him to the most important family gathering of their entire lives.
Which is just staggering when you think about it. And it introduces a foundational theological concept from our sources here, which is election before achievement.
Meaning, he absolutely did not earn this anointing.
Not in the slightest. Covenant loyalty is a response to grace, not the cause of it.
Wow.
See, in ancient Near Eastern cultures, kings justified their rule through divine mandate only after they achieved some massive military victory or, built a great city.
They said, the gods chose me because look at how awesome I am.
Exactly. Look at my resume. But God deliberately chooses the hidden, the overlooked, and the completely unaccomplished to magnify the fact that this calling is a pure gift.
So wait, if the goal is to shape a premier leader, why leave him out in the sheepfolds?
That's the big question.
Because in a modern context, if you identify a young prodigy, you put them in a gifted program, right? You get them networking.
Yeah.
You build them a platform on social media.
That is exactly the modern assumption. But the text insists that obscurity is the necessary crucible.
The crucible of obscurity?
Yes. A heart after God isn't forged under the spotlight because the spotlight breeds performance. It's formed in the dirt, the isolation, and the sheer boredom of the pasture.
So it's like, okay, think of a venture capitalist who completely ignores the slick Ivy League founder with the $1 million pitch deck, and instead they drive out to the middle of nowhere to fund some kid tinkering in a dusky garage.
Yes, I love that analogy. But take it even further.
Okay, how so?
The venture capitalist isn't just funding the kid because they see raw talent. They are funding them because they see an entirely different underlying metric for success.
Ah, I see what you mean.
The kid in the garage isn't building a product to get famous on the internet.
Yeah.
They are building it because they are obsessed with the work itself. In the pasture, David is learning to be obedient and faithful when absolutely no one is watching.
When there is zero audience to applaud his virtue,
Precisely.
that is radically subversive to a modern world that is completely obsessed with building a public platform.
It really is. Because, think about it, you don't pour a concrete foundation during an earthquake.
Right, that would be a disaster.
They're poured in the quiet, mundane days. The foundation you build in secret is simply revealed when the ground starts shaking.
And the ground is about to shake violently for David.
Very violently.
Because all of that hidden preparation gets dragged right into the blazing light of a national crisis. We hit 1 Samuel chapter 17, the Goliath narrative.
The famous one.
Right. Now look, everyone knows the story. It's the ultimate cliche. It's the underdog story we slap on absolutely everything from, sports upsets to startup companies taking on tech monopolies.
And by doing that, we severely reduce, if not entirely misunderstand, what's actually happening in the biblical text.
How so?
The analysis we are looking at aggressively reframes this entire event. This is not a scrappy underdog story. It is a covenant confrontation.
Walk me through that. Because, on paper, it's a giant, heavily armed guy with a lot of bronze armor against a teenager with a leather sling. How is that not just an underdog story?
We have to understand ancient champion warfare.
Okay.
Armies back then would often put forward their best warrior to fight in proxy to avoid mass casualties, but the underlying belief was that the gods of the respective armies were actually fighting through those human champions.
Oh, wow. So it's cosmic warfare.
Exactly. So when Goliath stands in the valley for 40 days taunting Israel, he isn't just saying, I'm physically stronger than you.
Right.
The text explicitly notes he is defying the armies of the living God. He is publicly claiming that the Philistine deities are vastly superior to Yahweh. It's a theological crisis, not just a border dispute over land.
So the giant is basically engaged in this high-stakes spiritual, psychological warfare.
Yes.
And King Saul, who, remember, is the tall, armored guy who physically looks like he should be the one acting as champion, he is completely paralyzed in his tent.
Saul is paralyzed because his entire operating system is based on human metrics.
He's crunching the numbers.
Right. He looks at Goliath's height, the weight of his spear, the thickness of his scale armor, and he runs the math. And the math says Israel loses.
It's a guaranteed loss on paper.
But David, who literally just showed up to deliver cheese and bread to his brothers, assesses the exact same situation through a completely different lens.
Here's where it gets really interesting. One of our infographics highlights David's words right before the fight in verse 47. He says, "The battle is the Lord's."
It's a crucial line.
The research points out that he isn't hyping himself up here. He isn't out there screaming, "I'm the deadliest slinger in the Middle East."
No, not at all.
He's operating on what the source calls theological confidence.
Which is a brilliant distinction by the author. Theological confidence versus self-confidence.
Because they look similar from the outside, maybe.
They can, yeah. A massive misconception the sources address is that imitating David means being fearless, aggressive, and bold in pursuing whatever we want.
Right, like the hustle culture version of David. Slay your giants, get that promotion.
Exactly. But David's courage doesn't stem from self-reliance or personal ambition. It stems from reverence.
Reverence for God.
Yes. He asks, what has God promised and what will vindicate his name? He is deeply personally offended that God's reputation is being dragged through the mud by this Philistine.
So his boldness is entirely dependent on his submission to God.
100%.
So think about the scene where Saul tries to force David to wear his royal armor, the heavy bronze helmet, the coat of mail, and David puts it on, walks around a bit, and then takes it off.
Right, he rejects it.
That's not just a tactical decision about mobility, is it?
Far from it.
Because if Goliath represents the ultimate symbol of worldly power and intimidation, then David rejecting the armor is a total rejection of the world's terms of engagement, isn't it?
Absolutely.
He refuses to play the giant's game. He refuses to fight a spiritual battle using Saul's carnal, human tools.
That's a vital insight from the sources.
Yeah.
He is publicly declaring that the living God does not save by sword and spear.
Yeah.
The hidden preparation in the pasture, fending off lions and bears with just a sling to protect a flock that wasn't even his, that prepared him to protect God's flock on the national stage.
So he steps up, sinks a stone into the giant's forehead, the giant falls, the Philistine army routs, and victory is secured for Israel.
A total victory.
It's the ultimate mic drop moment in history. You would naturally assume the credits roll right there. He gets the crown and he moves into the palace.
I think we think so.
But this is where the data gets incredibly sobering, because according to the David by the numbers infographic in our stack, David doesn't take the throne right away. Not even close.
No, he doesn't.
He spends roughly 15 years running for his life after this massive victory.
15 years as a fugitive. And this introduces a new theme in the research. The agony of the delayed promise.
It's a profound theological tension.
It really is. I mean, think about it. David has been anointed by Samuel. God has spoken the promise over his life. He has proven his calling by defeating Goliath.
Everyone knows he's the guy.
Yet he is not crowned.
He's sleeping in caves. He's literally feigning madness, like drooling on his beard, just to survive in enemy territory. He's scraping together a militia of outcasts and debtors.
All while King Saul, who is completely consumed by jealousy and paranoia, is utilizing the entire military apparatus of the state to hunt him down like an animal.
It's terrifying.
During this massive, agonizing gap between the promise and its fulfillment, David's covenant loyalty is pushed to the absolute breaking point.
Because it's one thing to have theological confidence when the adrenaline is pumping and the giant goes down in 5 seconds flat.
Right, that's the easy part, in a way.
It is a completely different universe to maintain that confidence on day 4,000 of hiding in a freezing damp cave, wondering if God just forgot about you entirely.
And the ultimate test of that loyalty happens in the dark. The texts zero in on 1 Samuel chapters 24 and 26.
These are incredible moments.
They are. These are instances where David has undeniable, historically documented opportunities to assassinate King Saul and end the chase.
Let's just end it right there.
Yeah. In one instance, Saul unknowingly walks into the very caves where David and his men are hiding back in the recesses.
I can't even imagine the tension in that cave. I mean, David's men are probably whispering, "This is it. God is literally handing him to you. Fulfill the prophecy."
You're begging him to do it.
So, okay, imagine holding a winning, life-changing lottery ticket, but the bank tells you that you can't cash it for 15 years.
That's a great way to picture it.
And in the meantime, the bank manager is actively trying to murder you.
Right.
So the restraint it would take not to just break into the vault, knock out the manager, and take the money that technically belongs to you anyway, it's just unimaginable. Pragmatically speaking, killing Saul makes perfect sense.
It makes all the sense in the world to a pragmatic mind. But covenant loyalty isn't pragmatic.
It's not.
David refuses. He sneaks up and cuts off a corner of Saul's robe just to prove he could have killed him, but he strictly forbids his men from attacking the king.
And his reasoning is what we really need to focus on here.
Yes, he says Saul is still the Lord's anointed.
Wait, let's pause there. Saul is actively trying to murder an innocent man. He's disobeying God at every turn, and David still respects his title.
He respects God's prerogative to remove the king.
Wow.
David refuses to advance a righteous promise through unrighteous, violent means.
Because the ends don't justify the means in this operating system.
Exactly. If God promised the throne, God has to deliver the throne. If David murders Saul to get it, he is operating into the exact same worldly, power-grabbing system that Goliath and Saul operated under.
He'd just become another Saul.
Exactly. So the delay wasn't just a waiting room for David.
The 15 years of suffering was the curriculum.
The author of the essay makes this point beautifully. Promise and suffering belong together in this spiritual formation. The delay forged patience, it forged humility, and absolute dependence on God.
He learned that he could not grab what God had not yet handed to him.
That is the essence of it, yes.
Okay, so he survives the wilderness. He passes the test with flying colors. He eventually gets the crown, right? The nation unites under him.
He reaches the peak.
And this is where the deep dive takes a truly devastating turn. Because while David handled the dark case perfectly, he absolutely disintegrates in the comfort of the palace.
Yes, the sources are completely unsparing here.
They really don't hold back.
Not at all. The infographics highlight his major moral failures. Specifically, there's the census, which was a massive act of military pride.
Right.
And then, far more horrifically, the events of 2 Samuel chapter 11.
The Bathsheba incident.
Yes. The adultery with Bathsheba, and then the premeditated murder of her husband, Uriah, to cover it all up.
It is incredibly jarring to read. I mean, you read about a man who refuses to lay a finger on his enemy, Saul, out of sheer reverence for God.
Right, such incredible restraint.
And then years later, you read about a king who abuses his absolute power to exploit a vulnerable woman and orchestrate the assassination of one of his most loyal, honorable soldiers.
The research emphasizes that Scripture makes absolutely no attempt to hide, sanitize, or excuse this moral collapse.
Which is pretty rare for ancient literature, isn't it?
Very rare. Ancient kings always had their court scribes edit out the bad stuff. But that transparency here is vital to the message. If we are looking for a flawless, morally perfect hero, David completely fails.
So a heart after God does not mean a heart incapable of catastrophic evil.
Exactly. It does not.
Then how on earth does he keep his title as the exemplar of this whole concept? I mean, shouldn't he be disqualified?
Because the differentiator is not the absence of sin, but the presence of true, radical repentance. We have to look at what happens when the prophet Nathan confronts David about the murder.
The famous confrontation.
Yes.
Nathan tells this whole parable about a rich man stealing a poor man's single beloved lamb, and David, hearing it, gets completely outraged. He demands justice.
He is furious.
And then Nathan drops the hammer and says, "You are the man."
Now, we need to compare this to King Saul again.
Okay.
When Saul was caught in a sin by the prophet Samuel, his immediate reaction was always self-preservation.
He got defensive.
Highly defensive. He would make excuses, he would blame his soldiers, and then he would beg the prophet to just honor him in front of the elders so he wouldn't look bad to the public.
Right, Saul's primary concern was always PR damage control.
Exactly. But David's reaction to Nathan is a total collapse of ego.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because David doesn't execute Nathan for treason, which, as an absolute monarch, he had the power to do right then and there.
He could have just silenced him.
And he doesn't blame Bathsheba. He utters two profound words in Hebrew, right?
Yes. Chatadi Yahweh, I have sinned against the Lord.
The liturgical depth of this is captured in the Psalms. The infographic we have quotes Psalm 51, verse 10. "Create in me a clean heart, O God."
A beautiful, desperate plea.
And the research also points to verse 4 of that same psalm. "Against you, you only have I sinned." Which, honestly, that line always struck me as a bit strange.
How so?
Well, didn't he sin against Bathsheba? And Uriah? I mean, he murdered the guy.
He absolutely did, yes. And the horizontal consequences of those actions tore his family and his kingdom apart for the rest of his natural life. The text doesn't shy away from that.
So I say, against you only.
The phrase is what the author of our essay calls covenant realism.
Covenant realism.
Yes. David recognizes that the root of all human abuse, all adultery, all murder, is fundamentally a betrayal of God first.
I see.
He grieves the vertical offense. He isn't just sorry he got caught and his reputation is ruined. He is devastated that he despised the word of the Lord.
So wait, there is a massive misunderstanding out there, one I've definitely held myself, that David's sin is this permanent stain that somehow invalidates his heart after God status.
That's a very common view.
But based on these texts, it's almost the opposite. The shattering of his perfectionism is exactly where we see the mechanics of covenant loyalty most clearly.
Because covenant loyalty knows how to return.
Wow.
David refuses to make peace with the darkness in his own chest. He doesn't redefine his sin as a mistake or a lapse in judgment.
He doesn't hire a crisis management team.
No, he brings his utter brokenness into the glaring light and throws himself entirely on the mercy of the court, so to speak.
And that brutal internal honesty is what gave Israel and really the world its language of worship.
Precisely. Let's look at the data again from the infographics. Out of the 150 Psalms in the Bible, 73 are directly attributed to David.
Almost half of the entire book.
Right.
So he's a monarch, he's a warlord, he's a politician. But fundamentally, at his core, his life is completely saturated with prayer, lament, rage, fear, and praise.
He pours it all out.
He doesn't compartmentalize his emotional life from his spiritual life.
He doesn't. And that language of worship is anchored to a very vital Hebrew concept that the essay spends significant time unpacking for us.
Which concept is that?
The concept of Hesed.
Let's break down Hesed, because it's spelled H-E-S-E-D, right? What exactly is it?
It is notoriously difficult to translate into English with just one single word.
English falls short sometimes.
It really does. It's often rendered in English Bibles as steadfast love, or loving kindness, or loyal covenant love.
Okay, so it's a type of love.
Yes, but it's a legally binding commitment that is executed with deep, passionate affection. It's not just a feeling you have, it's an action you take.
So it's not just, oh, I have fond feelings for you today. It's, I am bound to you by a promise, and I will act for your ultimate good no matter what it costs me.
Exactly. And importantly, Hesed is first and foremost the defining characteristic of God himself. Unlike the pagan gods of the ancient Near East, who were, fickle, easily angered, and purely transactional, Yahweh actually keeps covenant.
God is loyal.
God's Hesed is literally the only reason David isn't struck down on the spot by lightning for his sins with Bathsheba.
That makes sense.
And David, when he is functioning as he should, acts as a conduit for that divine Hesed to flow outward to the people.
The sources highlight a really specific example of this, don't they? The story of Mephibosheth in 2 Samuel chapter 9.
Yes, and this is a beautiful, deeply subversive story about power.
Give us the context here.
Well, Mephibosheth is the crippled grandson of King Saul.
The same Saul who tried to hunt David down.
Exactly. Now, in the ancient Near East, when a new dynasty takes over a kingdom, the standard operating procedure is to slaughter every single living relative of the previous king.
Right, so no one can challenge your claim to the throne later on.
You eliminate all the threats. It's Apex Predator 101.
But David does the exact opposite. He asks his court, is there anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him the Hesed of God for Jonathan's sake?
It's an incredible question.
He actively hunts down a potential political rival, not to kill him, but to restore his family lands and give him a permanent seat at the king's own dining table.
He takes the guy who should be a massive threat, a guy who literally cannot walk and has nothing to offer the king, and treats him like a beloved prince.
That completely inverts the ancient concept of authority.
It really connects back to the imagery of the shepherd we talked about earlier. The text cites Psalm 78 and Isaiah 40 to make this point.
What do they say?
They show that kingship in God's economy is fundamentally shepherding under God. Authority does not exist for the exploitation or the self-exaltation of the leader.
Like it does in almost every other human system.
Right. It exists for the protection, the guidance, and the nourishment of the vulnerable.
Historically, human kings are wolves.
They are.
They conquer, they consume the sheep. God gives David the fangs to fight off those wolves. I mean, he is a brilliant military tactician, but God demands that David act as a sheepdog.
A sheepdog, yeah.
His ultimate loyalty is always to the chief shepherd.
But, this raises an inescapable question that the research forces us to confront.
Which is?
If David is a sheepdog who occasionally bites the sheep.
Which he did, horrifically.
Right. If he is just a temporary, deeply flawed human king whose reign is scarred by these catastrophic moral failures, why does God make an eternal covenant with him?
Yeah, why double down on David?
How does his specific throne last forever?
And that pushes us straight into the grand narrative of Scripture.
We have to zoom way out now.
Yeah, the backdrop we mentioned earlier just expanded massively. The infographic we're looking at maps out a 12-stage historical and theological timeline, and it places David right in the crosshairs of all human history.
A massive scope.
Let's walk through this timeline because it really provides the why for everything we've talked about today.
Okay, so stage 1 on the timeline is eternity and creation.
The beginning.
God designs a world for faithful stewardship, where humanity's heart is perfectly aligned with divine lordship. There is unbroken fellowship.
But then comes stage 2, the fall.
The tragedy.
The human heart turns inward, it fractures, it becomes capable of the exact kind of deception and murder we saw in David's life.
This necessitates stage 3, the covenant. And this is where things pivot. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, God makes a shocking, enduring promise to David.
Even knowing all his flaws.
Despite knowing David's flaws, God promises to establish his house, his throne, and his kingdom forever.
A literal everlasting dynasty.
Yes, which fundamentally shifts the hope of the entire world.
How so?
Israel is no longer just looking back to Moses in the Exodus. They are now looking forward to a coming royal son who will bring ultimate redemption, which is stage 4.
So David inaugurates the kingdom phase, which is stage 5 on our graphic.
He does.
He brings unity, he captures Jerusalem, he secures the borders from enemies. But it's brittle, isn't it?
It is painfully brittle, because the human kings that follow David kings, like Solomon, Rehoboam, Manasseh, they mostly fail.
They crash and burn.
They give into gross idolatry, they exploit the poor, they completely forget what shed even means.
And their covenant disloyalty inevitably leads to stage 6, the exile.
A dark time.
The kingdom is physically shattered, Jerusalem burns to the ground, and the Davidic throne is violently emptied by Babylon.
Right. Now, if I'm an Israelite in exile in Babylon, I'm looking at the smoking ruins of the throne and thinking, well, the promise failed. The covenant is dead.
It's over. History's done.
But the prophets who operate during the restoration phase, stage 7, they insist that the covenant is not dead.
Why not?
Because the promise was grounded in God's faithfulness, not human performance.
Ah, I see.
The prophets began predicting a new David, a righteous branch from the stump of Jesse, a king who will actually possess the perfect, unbroken heart that David lacked.
Which brings us to the absolute climax of the timeline, stage 8, the Messiah.
The text points directly to Jesus of Nazareth as the final, perfect son of David.
The fulfillment of it all.
Yes, the Gospel of Luke cites the very promise made back in 2 Samuel 7, declaring that Jesus will reign over the house of Jacob forever.
This is the magnifying glass analogy that I was thinking about while reading this.
Let's hear it.
If you hold a magnifying glass up to David's life and you just stare directly at the glass itself, you see the smudges, the cracks, the deep flaws of his humanity.
The dirt on the lens.
Right. You see Bathsheba, you see the prideful census, you see the failures.
But if you look through the glass...
Exactly. If you adjust your focus and look through the glass, it magnifies something beyond him. It focuses your vision on the perfect king coming behind him.
That's a profound way to look at it.
Jesus fulfills what David only signaled. Where David used his ultimate power to kill Uriah, Jesus uses his absolute cosmic power to lay down his own life for his enemies.
Jesus is the true shepherd king.
That is precisely how the sources synthesize all of this. David's entire life is a redemptive foreshadowing.
It points forward.
And this has massive implications for stage 9, the church.
It does. Believers today actually inherit this posture of the heart. The research cites Ephesians chapter 1 and Romans chapter 5 to show that covenant loyalty isn't about ethnic tribalism anymore. It is fidelity to God in Christ.
Which eventually leads the timeline through stage 10, judgment, into stages 11 and 12, the new creation and eternity.
And in that renewed creation, the human heart will finally be fully sanctified.
Completely healed.
The internal division, the capacity for betrayal that plagued David so deeply, that will be eradicated forever. What David experienced only in fleeting, beautiful moments of worship will be the permanent, unbroken reality of the human experience.
Okay, that is just a staggering cosmic arc. I mean, we went from a dusty sheepfold in Bethlehem to the eternal new creation.
It covers everything.
It really does. But I want to make sure we don't just leave all this in the realm of high abstract theology.
Right, we need to land the plane.
We have to bring this down to Tuesday morning. The sources give us clear, practical takeaways, and we need to clarify what a heart after God actually looks like in practice for the listener.
Absolutely.
Let's dispel some of the major myths the research highlights at the end here.
Okay, the first myth we've thoroughly dismantled today, but it really bears repeating. A heart after God does not equal moral perfection.
Right. It's marked by covenant realism. Falling down isn't the end of the story. Refusing to get back up and confess is the real danger.
Exactly. Myth number 2. A heart after God is just about having passionate, intense, fleeting emotions.
Oh, this one is huge in modern culture. We equate spiritual depth with, like, how hard we cry to a sad worship song.
We do. And while emotion is absolutely part of it, I mean, just read the Psalms, they're incredibly emotional. The biblical concept of the heart actually includes the intellect, the will, and long-term allegiance.
It's the whole self.
Yes, it is a sustained orientation. It's a chosen direction over a lifetime, not a temporary adrenaline rush.
Myth 3. Covenant loyalty means blind loyalty to a human institution, a pastor, or a boss.
This is a dangerous distortion, and the essay calls it out.
It's how abuse happens, honestly.
It is. Covenant loyalty is loyalty to God first. And that ultimate loyalty actually limits and orders all of our other human allegiances.
So it's a hierarchy.
Yes, if a human institution demands you violate God's principles,
Mm.
just as Saul demanded of his soldiers when he ordered them to do evil, covenant loyalty actually requires you to disobey the institution.
Wow, that's powerful. And finally, myth 4. We should imitate David's boldness by just being fearless go-getters in everything we do.
Again, boldness without reverence is just arrogance.
It's just ego.
True courage is theological. It asks what honors God in the situation, not what builds my personal platform.
So what does this all really mean for us? Synthesizing everything we've read from Velazquez and the data, the true mark of discipleship is holding two incredibly difficult things in tension.
What are those?
You have to have the spine to stand up to the worldly intimidation of Goliath, to reject the heavy armor of the status quo. But simultaneously, you also must have the absolute humility to fall on your face when a Nathan points out your own sin.
That is brilliant. Courage to face the giant and humility to face the mirror.
Exactly.
You really cannot be a mature learner or a leader without both.
Well, we have covered so much ground today.
Yeah.
We've seen that David's lasting legacy isn't his military record. It is his recurrent orientation.
The direction his heart always returned to.
He proves that a heart after God is simply a heart that refuses to stop returning to God by grace, through faith, and entirely for his glory.
It's a beautiful picture.
It really is. But as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Okay.
We spend so much of our lives waiting for our Goliath moment.
I really do.
We're waiting for that massive public victory, the big promotion, the moment where the spotlight finally hits and everyone recognizes what we are actually capable of. We think that is when our real life begins.
The big break.
The big break, right. But if David's heart after God was primarily forged in the total mind-numbing isolation of the sheep fields,
When nobody was looking.
right, if it was tested in the terrifying dark caves hiding from a toxic, unjust boss, and if it was refined in the quiet, agonizing honesty of his darkest personal failures,
And what does that mean for us?
what if the most important spiritual work in your own life isn't happening in your public triumphs at all? What if the real work is happening in the unseen, frustrating, mundane waiting rooms of your life right now?
That changes the perspective entirely.
What if your current obscurity isn't a delay of your calling, but the very crucible creating it?
Something to really think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep seeking, keep learning, and no matter what happens, keep turning back.